Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
I say, Kwe Sheba. Good morning to everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Bonjour. Kwe Kakina. It is a beautiful day today. Elders, Indigenous leaders, ministers, and invited guests, I bring you warm greetings on behalf of the Algonquin Nation. I am here with our Grand Chief, John Boudreas, and together he and I, we welcome you. We welcome you, beautiful people, brothers and sisters, to the homeland of the Algonquin people. Pijajikoma Anishinaabe Kio Mama Weneniwag. Pijajikoma. Bienvenue au territoire de mes ancêtres, du peuple, la nation algonquin. So I welcome each and every one of you with a warm heart. I hold this grandfather, this eagle grandfather, in honor of First Nations and Indigenous children. And we must come together. We must come together with that one mind, that one heart, and that one prayer for the children. And let us remember that regardless of the title that we hold, regardless of the communities we work for, it is always for the children. Because we know that First Nations children, Indigenous children, all children are so sacred. They are a sacred blessing. In the wise words of one of the great leaders, Chief Sitting Bull of the Oglala Lakota people, he said, look to your daughters and to your sons, for they are your future. And regardless if we are First Nations, Inuit, or Métis, that is a sacred teaching that our ancestors have passed on to us, that the children indeed are our future. And let us hold them in our heart, and let us always remember why we are here. So I say to each and every one of you, let us put our hearts, our mind, and our voices one to say this prayer. As we say, Chimigwej Kishimenado Kina Keego Migwej Unje Nungum. We thank you, Creator. We thank you for every blessing that you have given us. Migwej Jojo Aki, as we thank that first Mother for all, we thank our Mother the Earth. As we thank that first grandmother, our grandmother Moon, Pokomistipikizis, we thank that first grandfather, our grandfather the Sun, Mishomiskizis, and all these gifts that the Creator has blessed us with. Indeed, He has blessed our children with this as well. And we ask that Creator finds it in His love to comfort and protect each and every one of us in the work that we do. And we come together with that prayer, Kinuin Emiyawin, to remember the families, the communities, and the nations of all the children who did not make it home. And Creator knows each and every one of those children by name, and they know we love them. And the Creator will comfort the families, the communities, and the nations. And we thank our ancestors. We say, Chimigwej Nijen Wendaganat Miigwej. Anabagis Kokamisag, Anabagis Mishomsag, Anabagis Das Pinigen. Ni buksendam Mashkawizuin Unji Nongum. Ni buksendam Minapamadzuin. Ni buksendam Zagi Eduin. Creator, we ask the grandmothers and the grandfathers of the four directions to come into this circle, to bless this circle, to protect all who are here, Creator. We ask the grandmothers and the grandfathers to lift us with strength, good words, love, and kindness for one another. And Creator, as we close this prayer, we remember the 7 grandfathers. And Creator, we ask that we continue to walk in the comfort and in the love and in the strength of those 7 grandfathers, whom we call love, wisdom, respect, courage, humility, honesty, and truth. And we say, Chimigwej Gishiminado Onje Ninuin Emiawin onje kakina. Miigwech kishimento onje kinuin emiawin. Chi miigwech kibijano ma nongom kakina. I thank each and every one of you for being here. And we pray for our leaders. We pray that our leaders, each and every one of you, to have strength and to remember that the Creator upholds you with goodness, love, and kindness, because it is for the children in all our communities. And let us make today, and as we move forward to tomorrow, that it will always be a brighter day for all our children, for indeed they do matter. Chimiigwej Zagi Kizagian. Thank you, and I love you all. Miigwej. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elder Commanda. Now I'd like to invite Elder Verna DeMonte to provide opening prayer.
Bomate Damame Mishiminen Litaba Pimushaple Damihan Kakyochi Payekutanos Vitnemietenotayan Tanchidita Kakyo T-Chefina Takayachik Monsieur Satran Wishtawtayo Gagwechamon Buju Kakyo Chimioyachik Weawayish Kani Kanichik. I have in my hand my tobacco and my rosary. That's how I pray. I'm asking the Creator to bless me and for all our leaders, our leader, Mr. Chartrand, for the Métis Nation, and for all the leaders that are here, and everyone else, the elders, the young, the children, for special blessing, especially since all the events that are happening in our nation. Masidi talbuju kakyo chimipoyik les enfants mina kaki mishkawachik wishtawo chikiwechik wayish les enfants ishkshakananik, for the children that were or are being found, a special blessing for them to journey home, and for their families not to grieve so much, and a healing hand for the Creator to bless them with. Nishawata de shipata penota Kakyegoch Kemon, Oma l'Assemblée, Kwayash mi Payek, Oma les enfants, Kawita Shamachik, Kwayash Chashtek. I ask the Creator for this event today and for announcement today that to hold a special blessing for them and for them to be okay with what we're going to happen here today. I want to thank the Creator for the opportunity for us to be here and to guide us as we meet today. I ask Him to give us courage, to give us vision for what's going to happen from now and later on. I ask for good health for everyone here and for everyone to stay safe. I know restrictions are starting to open up. The restriction much amok. For us not to go back to where we were a little while ago. On our journey, I'll ask the Creator to show us and to help us to extend our hand to each other. With the compassion, the Creator, les vieux, les jeunes, les monde, surtout les enfants, sweet heart. I always ask the Creator a special blessing for our elders, our young, our children, for like the Commander said, they are our future. I also ask Him, since restrictions are being lifted, for us to continue and have good health and still be safe in everything that we do. We don't want to regress to back where we were. Thank you, Lord. Amen. With that, thank you.
Thank you very much, Elder de Montigny. And now I'd like to invite Minister Bennett to deliver her remarks.
Kwekwe, Oudlakot, Tansi, hello, bonjour. Je vous parle aujourd'hui du territoire traditionnel de la Première Nation de Mississauga the Credit, où nous honorons tous les peuples autochtones qui ont pagayé ces eaux et dans les mocassins ont parcouru ces terres. With respect and appreciation and love for Elder Commanda, I'm pleased to provide an offering of tobacco in keeping with the tradition of the Algonquin Anishinaabe. And earlier, as an offering to Elder de Montagny, in appreciation for starting us off in a good way, I was asked to put down tobacco here at my home in Toronto under our pine tree, and to say thank you in advance of her words. And I hope that Elder Serkiak will be able to join us for the drum song at the end, and for him we have some Inuit cloudberry tea. It is, we look forward and hope that he will be able to join us. So I'm pleased to join Ministers Miller, Guilbeault, and Lametti in making this important announcement today, and huge gratitude to Grand Chief Boudrias, National Chief Archibald, President Obed, President Chartrand for being with us this morning. For many people across Canada, the recent news of finding unmarked graves at residential schools was an awakening to a deeper knowledge of the truth and the true horror of residential schools and the continuing impacts on Indigenous peoples today. These truths have been known by Indigenous communities for years. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission dedicated Volume 4 of their final report to the horrors of missing children and unmarked burials. As a country, we know the truth. Once you know the truth, you cannot unknow it. First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities have lived with the trauma caused by residential schools for generations. Now, as the country gains a deeper understanding of our shared history, Canadians are looking for ways to support Indigenous communities. Canadians want to play a role in the journey of reconciliation and the elimination of systemic racism that persists as a result of damaging colonial policies. Les peuples et communautés autochtones confrontés au traumatisme intergénérationnel des pensionnaires nous ont dit qu'ils avaient besoin d'un soutien supplémentaire pour retrouver leurs enfants disparus, les commémorer et guérir. So today, we're announcing an additional $83 million in funding through CERNAC to support more Indigenous communities in this extremely difficult and necessary work. These are additional to the 27.1 million, which was part of the 33.8 million committed in budget 2019 to implement Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action 72 to 76, bringing the Government of Canada's commitment to $116.8 million to support this extremely difficult and important work. We have been working with the National Centre of Truth and Reconciliation and have supported their work on records and archives through the investment in $10 million in budget 2016, and we continue to support their extraordinarily important work. We are also working to establish a national advisory committee which will provide expert advice to communities and government about this important work. It will be made up of experts who specialize in archaeology, forensics, pathology, and mental health, and all areas that can help in the difficult work of finding and identifying those children who attended residential schools and never returned home to their families or communities. Notre gouvernement sera à côté des peuples alors qu'ils avancent sur le chemin de la guérison. Ce nouveau financement permettra aux communautés de disposer de soutien nécessaire pour mener à bien le travail extrêmement difficile de recherche et d'exploration des sites funéraires. In this summer of reflection, all Canadians are now realizing what it must have felt like to be a parent whose child was taken from them against their will and then never returned home. As we prepare for the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th, I hope all Canadians will read or reread TRC calls to action, and especially Volume 4 of that final report. The revelations of Tecumloops and Cowessess have shown us that it is the spirit of those missing children that will guide our work together. Miigwech, Nakumik, Marci, thank you, merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Minister Bennett. And now we'd like to turn to Minister Miller.
Good morning, Kwekwe Ulukut, Tanse, hello, et bonjour. I want to thank Elders Commanda and de Montigny for their opening words and prayers, and hope that Elder Circle can join us for the end. If not, welcome his presence anyway. Before beginning, I would like to acknowledge I'm speaking to you from Mi'kma'ki, the traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. Since the discovery of unmarked graves in communities across the country in late May, a number of Indigenous peoples have contacted me and our government to share that they're now reliving the experiences they have worked so hard to move on from, and opening up old wounds they thought had healed. I want to take a moment to highlight the courage of those who are speaking out, as well as those who continue to suffer in silence. We're also thinking of the children and families who've suffered intergenerational trauma, continue to express the effects of it, and are now facing a huge setback in their own healing. We all know that we can't close our eyes, and as a government, as non-Indigenous Canadians, we have to stand beside and support survivors, their families, and communities as they begin or continue to heal. A 3-year investment through Budget 2021 has renewed essential mental health, cultural, and emotional supports for former residential school students and their families, and for those impacted by other intergenerational traumas, such as federal day schools and missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. We recognize as well that no budgetary element could have predicted a situation such as this. We recognize that there are immediate and urgent growing needs for supports, especially as more confirmations of unmarked burials at former residential institutions are made across the country. For this reason, today we're investing a further $107.3 million this year to support healing from intergenerational trauma. Through a 3-year investment in Budget 2021, I would note we are also maintaining the residential school crisis line, which gives former residential school students and their families access to emotional and crisis supports 24 hours a day. All Indigenous peoples can access the Hope for Wellness helpline, which provides immediate toll-free and online support and crisis intervention 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can chat with a counselor by phoning 1-855-242-3310, 1-855-242-3310, or through the website at hopeforwellness.ca. I'd also add that Indigenous Services Canada will continue to support the community plans to manage these buildings, whether those plans include demolition, rehabilitation, or the construction of new facilities on reserve so that activities currently taking place in these buildings can continue. Canada, to that end, will provide $100.1 million over 2 years to support this work. I had the privilege and honor to see the significance of this firsthand. On June 30th, I was in Lower Post, BC, in Casca Territory, where part of the residential school was torn down in birth and ceremony. 46 years to the date, it was finally closed. Elders and survivors in Watson Lake welcomed me to their sacred fire and generously shared their stories. It was a day to acknowledge Canada's shame and to witness the hope for a better future as the youth broke ground to a new multi-use building, a place focused on wellness and community, a place that they wouldn't dread going to, in fact, look forward to going to. People fought hard for far too long for that day, and I was thankful to be there to witness on behalf of Canada. As with the spirit of that day, we'll continue to support Indigenous peoples on their healing journey. In the last month, I've had the honor to speak to many survivors and leaders and visited close to a half dozen sites. And while each community has its set of protocols and approach to honoring the lives lost throughout this difficult time, there's a message of hope for the current generation. It's why, as well, we recently announced $699.7 million over 4 years through Budget 2021 to support approximately 50 schools and infrastructure projects in First Nations communities on reserve, provided by the Community Indigenous Support Fund, Infrastructure Fund, because this is not only a fundamental search and recognition of the truth, but how we move forward. Miigwech, Nakumik, Marci, thank you, and merci.
Merci beaucoup, Ministre Miller. Maintenant, je vais tourner la parole à Ministre Guibault.
Kwe, Udlukut, Tansi, hello, bonjour. Aujourd'hui, je me joins à vous sur le territoire traditionnel non cédé de la nation Huron-Wendat. The residential school system has caused harm to generations of Indigenous children and communities. Our government remains committed to reconciliation and to ensuring that the tragic history and ongoing legacy of residential schools is never forgotten. Il fait partie de notre devoir collectif de nous souvenir des impacts durables que les pensionnats ont laissés sur des générations de peuples autochtones. Il est également de notre responsabilité de reconnaître et de comprendre que l'héritage des pensionnats autochtones n'est pas seulement un chapitre tragique de notre passé, c'est un legs douloureux qui a des répercussions encore aujourd'hui. Many generations of First Nations, Inuit and Métis have struggled with the trauma inflicted by residential schools. Ils se sont battus pour faire éclater la vérité. Face à une grande douleur et un chagrin personnel, ils ont tenu bon pour raconter leurs histoires et être la voix de ceux et celles dont la voix, la vie, ont été volées. Residential schools in Canada robbed generations of Indigenous peoples of their languages, spirituality, and ways of interacting with the land and with the world. They've been forcefully disconnected from each other, from their communities, and from their own history. And our long national silence about the realities of residential schools has only deepened this disconnection. It has denied so many the room they need to grieve, to mourn, and to start the journey towards healing. To heal, Indigenous peoples must be able to reclaim their cultures and their languages. They must be able to reclaim, mourn, and commemorate the lives of the innocent children who never return from residential schools. They have the wisdom and resilience to do so. Our job is to support them with steadfast listening and actions that matches our words. Today, we take another step forward together on the path to reconciliation by announcing $20 million to fund the building of a national monument in Ottawa to honor survivors and all the children who were lost and never returned to their families and communities. This responds to Call to Action 81 of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. This monument will provide a commemorative space where both Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples can come together to express their collective grief and find a way forward to heal together. We will continue to work with survivors and other Indigenous partners to ensure that the approach taken in developing this monument are Indigenous-led, survivor-centric, and culturally sensitive. In addition, we're also announcing a further $9.6 million over 3 years to support initiatives to commemorate the history and ongoing legacy of residential schools, including events and activities marking the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Ce nouveau financement s'ajoutera à notre investissement actuel de 13,4 millions de dollars annoncé dans le budget 2021. Plus de 200 communautés et organisations vers le pays reçoivent du financement pour des projets visant à éduquer et à faire connaître ce sombre chapitre de l'histoire du Canada. We should all be moved by people like Phyllis Webstad and the story of her orange shirt. On September 29, 2020, our government tabled Bill C-5, which establishes the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, the Orange Shirt Day. This bill received royal assent on June 3rd. This is a direct response to Call to Action 80 of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation will be observed for the first time this year. Honor survivors, their families, and communities. It ensures that the public commemoration of the tragic and painful history and legacy of residential schools remains a vital component of the reconciliation process. Reconciliation is a long-term commitment that requires the engagement of all. This is just the beginning of our journey towards reconciliation. By working together, we can grow the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation and the proposed monument into important and meaningful touchstones that will promote healing, remembrance, respect, and understanding. Nous pouvons pleinement intégrer la vérité et la réconciliation dans notre identité culturelle. Nous pouvons construire notre avenir ensemble. Merci, thank you, miigwech, nakumik, merci.
Merci, ministre Thibault. Maintenant, je cède la parole au ministre Lametti.
Kwekwe, Ulukut, Tansi, bonjour, hello. I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from my office, which is located on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. I would like to thank Elder Commanda and Elder de Montigny for starting us off in a good way, and I know that Elder Serquac is here with us in spirit. Privileged to join my colleagues Bennett, Miller, and Guilbeault for this important announcement today, and particularly honored to join the AFN's new National Chief, Roseanne Archibald, ITK President Nathan Obed, and MNC Vice President and National Spokesperson David Chartrand. Nous sommes ici en tant que partenaires, amis et alliés durant des moments difficiles. Vous avez entendu mes collègues et je veux maintenant vous parler de ce qui touche mon portfolio. I have heard the calls for justice that have been ringing loud and clear throughout the country since the first unmarked graves were found. I will admit that there have been moments during this time where I wish I had the powers that some have attributed to me and my office. But the reality is that Canada does not, at least not yet, have the legal framework or tools needed to deal with the complex issues we are confronting now. Our laws are not reflective of Indigenous values, traditions, and practices. Il est donc clair que nous devons travailler autrement pour soutenir les Premières Nations, les Inuits et les Métis alors qu'ils traversent leur deuil et répondent éducatement et respectueusement à leurs besoins. C'est le processus que nous amorçons aujourd'hui. I'm pleased to announce my intention to appoint a special interlocutor to support Indigenous peoples and communities who are working to identify and address unmarked and undocumented graves and burial sites. But I want to give due credit for this idea. It came from Indigenous leaders, particularly Indigenous leadership in British Columbia, Cook Peak, Kashmir, and Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond, as well as AFN National Chief Roseanne Archibald. Ils nous ont aidés à peaufiner l'idée et je leur suis éternellement reconnaissant de leur leadership. Un moment où étaient confrontés à leur propre deuil, leur peine, leur colère, ils nous ont permis de trouver une solution constructive afin de nous permettre à tous d'avancer. Évidemment, je veux aussi mentionner que l'interlocuteur spécial sera sélectionné suivant des discussions avec le leadership et les communautés des Premières Nations, des Inuits et des Métis. Le mandat de l'interlocuteur spécial sera d'abord et avant tout de bâtir ou rebâtir une relation de confiance et de la transparence alors que nous progressons vers la guérison, la justice et la réconciliation. So what will the special interlocutor do? Working with Indigenous peoples, this person will assist in charting a path forward. They will identify needed measures and recommend a new legal framework that respects the dignity of burial sites and Indigenous children, in line with the wishes and traditions of communities and families. They will evaluate federal laws, policies, and practices surrounding unmarked and undocumented graves and burial sites at residential schools, and set out responsibilities for their protection. They will facilitate dialogue with provinces and territories for matters within their jurisdiction and with other relevant institutions such as churches. And perhaps most critically, the special interlocutor will focus on establishing a relationship between Indigenous peoples and their governance institutions and Canada that will help us move forward together in healing and in partnership. This means establishing and strengthening trust that must be built from the ground up. It means using culturally appropriate engagement processes that allow space for open dialogue between Indigenous peoples and government. It's also important to note that the special interlocutor's mandate may evolve as discussions with Indigenous communities and leaders take place. The role will be developed collaboratively to ensure that it meets the needs of Indigenous peoples. La décision de nommer un interlocuteur spécial est prise avec humilité, ouverture et dans l'espoir d'une véritable réconciliation. Together, we can create a new process that will allow for a deeper dialogue and meaningful engagement and build a better, just future for all Indigenous peoples. Megwich, Nakarmik, merci, thank you, merci.
Merci, Minister Lameti. Now I'd like to invite Grand Chief Boudrias for his remarks.
Elder Demonti, Elder Commander, President Obed, National Chief Archibald, and Mr. Chartrand, and as well as all the ministers. Kwekwe Kakina, Kwekwe Anishinabek, Asich, Kwekwe Wijak, Minopjak, Anishinaabe Aki Odinen. So welcome today from the Algonquin unceded territory. I'm very proud to be here today and participate in today's announcement. It's extremely encouraging to hear of all to hear these dollars being invested into this very, very important file and issue that all our Algonquin peoples and all Indigenous peoples across the country are facing right now. And it clearly demonstrates that you have been listening. You have been listening to all of us, and that you're ready to take action. We've said it many times that words, actions outdo words, and that's what we are looking forward to. And there's no dollar sign or dollar amount on healing, but by investing these amounts is where we will permit us to have the actions to lead to that healing, and that healing will lead to reconciliation. So I'm very, very encouraged for the Algonquin people, because all of our people have been touched in some way by residential schools, but I'm encouraged for all Indigenous people. Je suis très encouragé par cette annonce aujourd'hui pour la nation algonquine, ainsi que pour toutes les nations autochtones du pays. And I'm very glad that, and I look forward to continued action on behalf of everyone. Everyone needs to participate in reconciliation. Everyone needs to accept the truths of the past, and it is us that are the stewards of the future and how we move forward. And I look forward to moving together towards this continued path of reconciliation on behalf of the Algonquin peoples and all Indigenous peoples. Miigwech.
Thank you. And now I'd like to turn to National Chief Archibald.
Wachimiswe. Roseanne Archibald Natishnakas and I'm coming to you today from Treaty 6 territory in Saskatchewan. And first of all, I want to acknowledge the Creator, the world around us, and our place within it. And I want to give thanks to our Creator for walking alongside us as we mourn the countless little ones who never came home from the institutions of assimilation and genocide. I no longer want to call them schools. I stand in support of all survivors, loved ones, family members, and First Nation leaders who have undertaken the painful work of recovering our little children. Many Canadians have expressed shock and are angered about the discoveries, the recoveries of our little ones buried in unmarked graves across Canada. Canadians are grieving with us. They are shocked. We as First Nations have known the truth. We have shared this truth. We have fought for this truth to be heard. And we say again, there must be truth before reconciliation. For decades, we were not believed. Our survivors were not believed. And some still may not believe. But today, I once again state an undeniable truth. Canadian government policies, along with the Church, committed crimes against humanity, crimes against our children. Make no mistake, we are seeing evidence of genocide. The announcement today is long overdue. It's a long overdue step in acknowledging the devastating harm that these institutions have had and continue to have on the generations on many generations of our people, and how intergenerational trauma continues today. Now is the time for accountability, action, and healing. I welcome the government's commitment to funding these Indigenous-led, survivor-centric, and culturally safe efforts. But we must ensure, people keep texting me, but we must ensure that First Nations take the lead on efforts to pursue justice and healing. I also look forward to working with the special interlocutor as soon as possible. Now, I ask all levels of government and all Canadians to listen to First Nations and Indigenous leadership, respect our voices, our knowledge, and our grief as we continue fighting for the little ones, as we have been doing for so long. Thank you, miigwech, ninanaskamun gasakitin. Ninanaskamun in my language means I am grateful, I am thankful, I thank you, and gasakitin means I love you.
Thank you, National Chief. And now we will turn to President Obed.
Nakumik, thank you. Udlaku, good morning, everyone. It's so good to be here on this day where we are embarking on a next step in the work that is necessary to respect the human rights of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Canadians and Canadian children. I think it's so important to recognize that these children were Canadians in Canada when this all happened. And the reasons why we need bills like C-15, the implementation of the Indigenous of the United Nations Indigenous Peoples' Rights, is because our human rights were not upheld and respected for much of Canada's history. The announcements here today, especially in relation to the process of how we will go through this together, are necessary. The creation of a special interlocutor. We look forward to working with First Nations and Métis leadership, as well as the Government of Canada, to give this particular structure the ability to do good work and to get to the end result that we all want, which is respect and dignity for all those affected by this terrible Canadian tragedy, but then also for the respect of the missing children and the rights that they were never allowed to partake in as children. We still have to honor them and honor their legacy today. The National Advisory Committee also can play a very meaningful role in guiding all of this work. And we look forward to working with the Government of Canada and First Nations and Métis to ensure that this particular structure as well is supportive and helpful towards the various types of work that we know are necessary. I'm also very pleased to hear about the additional investments in mental health and in supports for residential school survivors and all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis who have been affected and need mental health supports during this time and also for the times to come, because these issues are not things that are compartmentalized and are things that are dealt with in a specific time frame. The intergenerational trauma and the lived experience and trauma that many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis have in this country it requires mental health supports in many different ways over the course of a person's lifetime. We have to maintain that support for all those who have been through such difficult events. Also, in relation to the monument that is being announced today, we recognize that this monument will be on the unceded lands of the Algonquin, and so we're very pleased that the Algonquins are here to help kick off this discussion that will lead to a monument. I can't help but also think about the opportunities we have with 100 Wellington, and a place where we can also dedicate space to remember the children and to remember residential schools and their horrific impact on Indigenous peoples in this country. Also looking forward to September 30th and the first national holiday or national day of remembering in relation to truth and reconciliation. And we, as a country, have a lot of work to do to properly respect First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. And I do hope that we can use this day as a way in which to understand how to be respectful and kind and loving to one another between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people in this country, while also keeping the heart of this particular day, which is the resilience of Indigenous people and also the truth of what Indigenous people have gone through in this country. Look forward to the work to come, and ITK is supportive of these developments. Looks forward to working in close partnership with the Government of Canada, First Nations, and Métis in implementing this work.
Thank you very much, President Obed. I would like to invite now Chief Chafra.
I'm not a chief, I'm a president, but thank you very much. I'd like to thank of course, my good friend Claudette, Elder Commanda, for the prayer. I speak fluent Pseudo also. Elder Verna, of course, de Monte, for the Elder of the Métis Nation, and it's such an honor to hear Michif being spoken here, as referenced by Minister Guilbeault. Language is essential. Of course, we miss Elder David Sirkwak. I always love hearing his stories and his messages. But let me start off by thanking the four ministers that are here, Mr. Bennett, Miller, Guilbeault, and Lametti. It shows that this is a very important file for this government in this country, because we have four ministers here today to join us, and I think it's sending a message that this is a priority for our Prime Minister and a priority for this government. I also want to thank again the Algonquins for allowing us, of course, in their territory. Grand Chief John Baudras, it was an honor listening to you, and also, of course, National Chief Roseanne Archibald. I look forward to the great success that Archibald will bring, and of course our long-term partnership we will build, and my great good friend Natan Albad. It's always a pleasure to have him speak with such great caliber of leadership for the Inuit. But today's an important day for all of us. I think this country is on a journey together. It took us over a century to get here, and it's going to take us many decades to get past this. There's a lot of pain and suffering that's happening right now, and there's more to come. And I ask all Canadians to join us in this journey because it's going to take us time. It took a lot of time to try to take us out of this country, to rid us of our existence, of our culture and our languages, and just our soul. And it's important that we recognize the suffering that's happening out there. It's hurting so many people. And these nightmares that are coming on a regular basis now as we travel across Canada, finding residential school and finding these mass graves, and this the actual development of genocide that was taking place in this country, it needs to be reckoned with. And I thank you, Mr. Lametti, for the appointment of the interlocutor. I think it'll be great for us to have a discussion with him. I think we need, or her, we don't know who that person is yet, but clearly at the end of the day, one of the things that we need to look at, how do we address the crimes of the past? To a lot of people out there, they're seeking justice. They want to be dealt with. They want their pain to be resolved in a way this country has shown us that the law is supposed to be there to protect us, and now we need to see this law and move it forward. But these acknowledgements today and these announcements of these new resources sends us a message that your government does take this as a priority. It will help us in many different ways. It'll definitely prevent us from no longer denying or trying to hide what was done in this country. And I think the world is watching, and we need to be ready for this. We need to show the world what Canada is all about. We talk about Canada being a caring, loving country, an acceptance country, a country with a kind heart, and that cares for everyone. What we're asking this country now is to care for Indigenous people. This journey, be patient with us. There's a lot of pain and suffering. This is like a horror movie it's becoming real, and we need to make sure that we can do everything in our powers to make those changes. We have to work together, and I think the actions that we are seeing right now from the Trudeau government is one that will resonate with change. It will make change. You just got to give it time. But in order for it to work, you've got to give Indigenous governments the right to make these decisions and the communities to have their say. And I look forward to these consultations, discussions, and moving forward on these actions, because I think this pathway, we're all going on this journey together as Canadians and the governments of the Indigenous people, the governments of Canada, and hopefully the provinces and municipalities will join us in this journey, because at the end of the day, I think we're all seeking the same. We're seeking justice. We're seeking that this country can stand proud in the United Nations or anywhere in the world that this is a caring and loving country, and it cares for every Canadian, including the founders, of course, the Indigenous people who go back, First Nation go back 10,000 years. And I honor them, and they suffered the most in residential school. The Métis yet have to be dealt with, and that's something we will deal with in this country on day school, and that's upcoming. And I trust this government will have the negotiation discussion. But right now, I'm very proud of the announcement that's being made by this government. I believe it'll start probably helping the healing and also helping the development of strategies and mental health, as mentioned by Nathan. Those are pressing issues right now with COVID adding on to all of that, and now we see a drought and that's happening to so many people in Western Canada right now, and there's so much pain out there and suffering, and we need to all come together as Canadians. So I ask Canada, all Canadians, walk with us in this journey, stand with us in this journey, work with us, because at the end of the day, it took this country to bring us down. Now they asked this country to bring us up. So let's work together, and as I said, the Métis, the Red River support this strongly, and the Métis Nation will always stand there to make sure we protect our citizens no matter where they live. So take care. Again, ministers, be safe out there, but thank you, Prime Minister, for his vision. And again, I think all my fellow leaders, Indigenous governments, we will work together, we will find solutions, we'll help our people, and hopefully we'll find a way to start the healing, which I said will take decades to get.
Thank you, President Chapran. Maintenant, nous allons commencer la période de questions avec les membres des médias. Vous aurez la chance de poser une question puis un suivi. S'il vous plaît, annoncez votre nom, votre organisation et à qui vous posez votre question. We will now begin the question and answer portion of this announcement with members of the media. We'll have a chance to ask one question and one follow-up. Please state your name, your organization, and who your question will be addressed to. Operator, can I please have the first question?
Thank you. Merci. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. There will be a brief pause while participants register for questions. Il y aura un court délai vous permettant de vous enregistrer dans la file d'attente. Merci de patienter. We thank you for your patience. Our first question is from Rafi Boudjikanian from CBC News. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Thank you. Hi, my first question is for Chief Archibald. You said in your remarks that clearly we're seeing evidence of genocide. Today you're standing next to 4 Canadian government officials representing a government that has sidestepped using this word so far, at least when it comes to residential schools. So how difficult is it to embark on a journey of reconciliation with them in that circumstance?
You're on mute, National Chief.
Oh my gosh. I don't know when I'm going to stop doing that after almost 2 years. Thank you for the question. I see a large part of the journey of reconciliation being about a journey of healing. And that journey of healing is something that we all have to do together here in Canada. And so it is becoming very evident that crimes were committed. We are saying that those crimes have to be investigated. And we believe that this announcement today is the first step on walking that road together. We had asked for a special rapporteur to look at the guardianship structure and the authority to protect those sites, and more importantly, to support an investigation of these crime scenes that involve our children, to document the investigations and to seek justice internationally. This announcement today is the first step. You heard, I believe it was Minister Guilbeault, say that we are at the beginning of this journey together, and I know that we are. I have absolute faith that not only are these ministers committed to healing and the journey forward, but that the majority, the clear majority of Canadians are also committed to the healing journey with us. And we're going to walk that journey, and it will always be something that we can look back at in history and say that we did this together. At the same time, it is a difficult journey. Healing is not an easy process. And so, but we're all committed to it. And that's why I'm on this call today, being a part of this announcement.
Thank you. My follow-up question is for Minister Lametti. In your remarks, you referred to wishing you had some special powers that your office didn't have. What kind of powers were you talking about, and what would you do with them?
Thanks, Rafi, for the question. I guess what I was trying to say in an indirect way was that I'm the Attorney General of Canada, not the Attorney General of the United States, and that the way we have configured the system is that I don't have investigative power, and I have only limited prosecutorial powers. We've given that to prosecution services at the federal and provincial levels across Canada. And in addition, we have the complexity of a federal structure in which these kinds of investigations are undertaken by local police, the police of jurisdiction, and then the prosecutions would, working with the police, be undertaken in most cases by provincial prosecution services. So that's the system that we are actually in. It may be that's something we want to look at through the interlocutor in order to push these kinds of files forward. But for the time being, that interlocutor will help open doors, facilitate dialogue amongst all of these various actors, and will help us identify these kinds of gaps that might exist in which we might be able to do better down the road. This will be done in a human rights frame. This will be done in a forward-looking frame. I think National Chief Archibald, President Obed have mentioned the human rights frame with an open, frankly, an open mind towards, working with international bodies should they decide to come in, and working with all levels of government, and Indigenous and non-Indigenous.
Thank you, Minister Lametti. Opérateur, prochaine question, s'il te plaît.
Thank you. Our next question is from Mackenzie Gray from CTV News. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Hello. My first question is for Minister Miller. Minister, it's been 75 days since the first graves were found in Kamloops, and today is the first time I think that you're announcing new money for finding unmarked graves. What took your government so long to announce this money?
Well, first, Mackenzie, and perhaps Minister Bennett or Kipo would want to speak as well. We have been first and foremost creating a central point within government for communities to reach out and get further support, whether it's for searches, whether it's for the next steps. And as you've noticed, and perhaps noticed nationally, there isn't one cohesive approach to how a particular community wants to proceed with respect to the discovery of a site. A lot of them had children taken from many surrounding communities, and so there is a process that is being observed within communities to make sure that they are doing the right thing and be the imperfect voices of survivors as they articulate the path forward, as well as reach out to other communities that may have had children taken to these institutions. And so throughout this process, we've had a central point in government to unblock resources and funds and support. We've said in no uncertain terms that we will be there for them. every step of the way. And so as we start to see the full profile of what this will cost, we've been working around the clock to ensure that we have numbers that are sticking to what we are seeing as where the trend is going. And if you look at the breadth of the announcement today, it goes from ensuring that there is money for searches, which is frankly the lesser part of the envelope. That is less costly than what we are seeing as being a little more budgetary pressure, which is the increased health on mental health supports. We've heard from, in particular, the team in Kamloops, Chief Casimir, that they want medium and long-term supports with respect to mental health, that in some communities they want support in environmental remediation to these sites where there have been heavy oils used and contamination, as well as looking towards the future, which is building up new buildings where children can look forward to attend. That was the case in Lower Post and other places around the country. You also saw announcements in and around the Mohawk Institute, where Infrastructure Canada invested about $8 million in fixing a building that they want to use to preserve the evidence. So there is a range of approaches that we have to appreciate, Mackenzie, and also a timeline that we need to respect. There are many communities that want to respect the elders need to take a little more time, and they don't want to be left behind in the funding announcement. So there is a complexity to this. Up to now, communities have had a response from government that has been perhaps less coordinated and more piecemeal insofar as they've had to go to Infrastructure Canada, my department, Minister Bennett's department, Minister Guilbeault's department, independent organizations for support for this. And now what we're announcing is looking at what's gone on in the last 2 months, a cohesive and coherent approach, I guess a one-stop shop of sorts at the federal government where communities can get what they are saying they need. And that's something we've said all along, but now we've got numbers that stick to it. Perhaps Minister Bennett would like to add some as well.
Yes, thank you. And Mackenzie, absolutely. The money that we announced on June 3rd, the $27.1 million, we've been just really impressed with the number of proposals and the excellence of the proposals in terms of detail of what can happen in the short, medium, long term, and our ability to quickly evaluate and get that money out the door. And it became clear that we would need more, as was anticipated, and so that's what we're doing today. We want to be able to let all communities know that we'll be there with them as they do this difficult work, whether it's the knowledge gathering, whether it's commemoration, whether it's the searches. We are working, as Minister Miller said, as a whole of government, that from Parks Canada to DND to everybody is really prepared to put their best expertise forward in kind, but also for all of us to have the kind of resources that we can then make sure is there for communities as they plan and do this important work. But it's really unbelievably inspiring to see the just meticulous nature of the planning and the work that we get to support.
My follow-up question is for Minister Lametti about what is going on in China right now. Last night in a press conference, Dominic Barton, the ambassador, was asked if he thinks there is a connection between the Schellenberg verdict and Meng Wanzhou case. He said, and this is a quote, "I don't think it's a coincidence that these things are happening right now while events are going on in Vancouver." Is it the position of the government that the Schellenberg case is tied to Meng Wanzhou?
As you know, I never comment publicly on the Meng Wanzhou case because of a potential role that I may play at the end of that process, which we have developed in particular to make sure we respect the rule of law and procedural fairness for anybody who faces extradition. What I can say is that we condemn in the strongest possible terms this death sentence for Mr. Schellenberg. We continue to seek on his behalf. Canada opposes the death penalty in all cases, and that continues with respect to this particular case. And we will also continue to work diligently, all of our colleagues around the table, with every resource that we have at our disposition, to work to free Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, for which we feel they are trumped up charges for which there's absolutely no basis in law.
Thank you, Minister. Operator, next question.
Thank you. Our next question, notre prochaine question est de Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. À vous la parole. Please go ahead.
Oui, bonjour. Juste avant que je pose ma question, je me demandais, M. Lametti, si c'était possible pour vous de répéter en français ce que vous venez de dire, votre réaction en fait à la condamnation à mort de Robert Schellenberg.
Merci, Laurence. Donc, nous condamnons comme pays la sentence de M. Schellenberg. Nous sommes comme pays contre peine de la mort, évidemment, et donc nous condamnons ce qui a été décidé par le tribunal. Nous allons continuer à militer justement pour une clémence dans l'espèce. Je voudrais ajouter aussi que nous travaillons en tant que gouvernement avec toutes les ressources à notre disposition pour libérer M. Spavor et M. Kovrig. Nous pensons que ce sont des processus opaques et arbitraires, et nous voulons qu'ils soient libérés aussitôt que possible.
Parfait. Merci, M. Lametti. Ma première question est peut-être pour le ministre Miller. C'est concernant du financement pour la démolition de certains anciens pensionnats autochtones. C'est ce que révélait mon collègue là, Daniel Leblanc ce matin sur le site de Radio-Canada. Est-ce que c'est possible de confirmer ce financement-là? Est-ce que c'était une demande des communautés? Si oui, comment est-ce qu'elles vous ont dit que cette destruction-là pouvait les aider dans leur guérison? And then maybe if Chief Archibald, you want to add on this, the funding for the demolition of certain sites of where there were residential schools, how will this help your journey towards healing?
Merci, Laurence. L'annonce d'aujourd'hui, évidemment, c'est une annonce d'une somme importante, d'une centaine de millions de dollars, spécifiquement pour la démolition et la reconstruction de bâtiments sur les sites. Ça reflète la demande, évidemment, qu'on a eue depuis les 2 derniers mois, mais aussi les demandes qu'on voulait honorer depuis fort longtemps. Vous vous souvenez peut-être dans mon allocution que j'avais mentionné le site à Lower Post qui milite, dont le peuple Cascam milite depuis fort longtemps, trop longtemps, pour à la fois démolir le building existant, l'annexe qui restait, et reconstruire un bâtiment, un multiplex sportif pour les enfants, pour donner espoir à des gens qui n'en avaient pas vis-à-vis ce site. Et donc, c'est le reflet de plusieurs demandes qui existent à travers le pays. Je dirais que les demandes ne sont pas identiques. Il y a une volonté à certains niveaux de détruire et de passer à autre chose. Il y a dans d'autres une volonté, je pense au Mohawk Institute, de préserver l'édifice et d'avoir un site qui honore la mémoire des victimes. Alors, ça dépend. Jusqu'à maintenant, il a fallu le faire, je dirais, à l'emporte-pièce, aller chercher des enveloppes qui n'étaient pas à point ou nécessairement tissées sur mesure pour les pensionnats en tant que tels. Maintenant, c'est une somme importante dédiée à l'infrastructure, à la destruction de ces édifices qui évoquent évidemment l'horreur des pensionnats. Dans certaines circonstances, mais ça dépend du processus qui se déroule à l'intérieur de la communauté, un processus qui peut être très, très, très long. Évidemment, les sensibilités et vu la délicatesse de l'enjeu. Donc, c'est important, évidemment, et la somme est là, et les communautés qui le voudront vont avoir accès à ces sommes. Donc, ça reflète évidemment les discussions qu'on a eues au cours des 2 derniers mois.
Chief Archibald, do you want to? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I've always said this, that we have to do more than just destroy or tear down these symbols of colonialism, these symbols that represent assimilation and genocide. We have to do more than just tear them down. If you look at the fact that there are 139, recognized institutions that were built across Canada. In total, there were 1,300. If you even multiply that by today's standards of how much it costs to build a school, you're talking about potentially close to $2 billion that was invested in the destruction of First Nations people, our societies, our children, our communities, our language, our culture. And this announcement is the very beginning. It is really, truly the very beginning, because what we need is for governments, both federally, provincially, to invest the same amount of resources to rebuild these communities, to have communities reclaim their language, their culture, and to have an ownership on their healing journey. And so I agree that if a community wants to have the residential school torn down, that's not the total answer. The answer is, what will you build in its place that will help the healing of that community? Healing is the most important thing that we need to start talking about. How are we going to heal from this as First Nations people? How are we going to heal from this as a country? And that requires a significant amount of investment. So perhaps you're looking at building cultural centers where some of these former institutions stood. We have to not only tear down things, we have to rebuild and we have to heal. Miigwech.
Merci. Apparatrice.
Est-ce que oui, merci. Est-ce que je peux demander ma dernière question au ministre Lametti sur le rôle de l'interlocuteur spécial? Est-ce que c'est possible d'expliquer en termes, disons, très, très concrets ce que cette personne-là va faire? Juste parce que je suis encore confuse par rapport à son rôle et à comment est-ce que ça se compare par rapport à un procureur spécial qui fait des enquêtes sur les crimes commis dans les pensionnats.
Merci Laurence pour la question. Donc la précision est la suivante. Donc une procureure est quelqu'un qui prend la preuve de l'enquête, donc de la police, et qui décide d'aller ou pas aller devant un tribunal avec un procès criminel ou un procès en droit pénal. Un interlocuteur n'a pas le droit, évidemment, d'enquêter, ni de poursuivre dans le contexte d'une poursuite pénale. Mais ça va être une personne qui va faciliter le dialogue entre ces deux acteurs-là, une communauté, peut-être l'Église, peut-être des niveaux de gouvernement. Ce que j'ai entendu, ce que la chef nationale Archibald et d'autres m'ont dit, c'est qu'il n'y avait pas une fiducie dans le système. Un trust, comme on dit en anglais. Donc, il faut rebâtir ces relations-là parce que ils ont été démolis dans le passé, justement des fois par l'inaction, des fois par le fait d'avoir pris trop de temps. Donc, une interlocuteur va aider, faciliter, va ouvrir les portes, va travailler évidemment avec le comité que Madame Bennett vient d'annoncer, un comité d'experts, et ainsi on va procéder vers l'avant, pas par pas, évidemment, et nous espérons de rebâtir la confiance entre les acteurs, surtout dans les communautés autochtones. Et ça va aussi identifier les lacunes juridiques, si on peut améliorer le système, si on doit changer les lois, soit le code criminel, soit la loi sur les crimes contre l'humanité, etc. S'il y a des changements à apporter, c'est une personne qui va nous aider à l'identifier.
Merci, ministre. Opératrice, prochaine question.
Thank you. Our next question is from Tom Cardozo from the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Hi, thank you so much. My question is for Minister Bennett. Minister Bennett, the Globe and Mail reported this week that the Catholic Church had billions of dollars in assets, despite the fact that it had not paid its entire residential school settlement commitments. In a story on Monday, Indigenous leaders, including National Chief Archibald, called for a review of the settlement agreements. Will the government revisit the agreement?
Again, all agreements are determined by the survivors and the participants, and so it is up, I think, to us to have a look at what Catholics are asking for the Catholic Church to do, and they're asking the Catholic Church to do better. They are saying that they weren't even asked to help when the Catholic Church failed in their ability to raise the $25 million. And so what I am hearing is that the Catholics want the Church to be there now, to deal with the intergenerational trauma, to deal with the healing, to be part of renewed efforts to address the tragic events and the persisting trauma and pain in Indigenous communities now. So I think that the issue is for everyone to step up and do more, and I think that is what I'm hearing from Catholics in terms of how they want to help and how they want the apology. They want the Pope to come to Canada to deliver the apology. The Prime Minister has asked. I have asked the Council of Catholic Bishops a number of years ago. I felt in the meeting with the Kamloops that the bishops were very much further along than they had been a couple of years ago in terms of what would need to be said in an apology, and we will continue to apply the pressure in that I think the Church has a moral obligation to do more.
Okay, thank you. And my follow-up question is for Mr. Lametti. Minister Lametti, in the 2015 Saskatchewan court case, the government argued that the Catholic Church had violated the terms of settlement agreements. Will the interlocutor look at whether the Catholic Church was in default?
Again, that's a legal question. You'll understand, Tom, that I don't give legal advice or legal direction on these kinds of conferences. The interlocutor will be looking at the relationship, all the relationships that exist, and hopefully will interact with the Catholic Church and survivors and levels of government. But I think, as Minister Bennett has said, these are things that Catholics like myself would like to see looked at again, would like to see reopened, and whether or not there's a technical legal response to the question is not something I'm going to answer publicly, but certainly all options are always on the table.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Operator, we have time for just one more question, please.
Thank you. Our last question is from Hélène Buzetti from la Coop de l'Information. À vous la parole. Please go ahead.
Bonjour, je pense que ma question est pour Monsieur Lametti, mais peut-être Monsieur Miller aussi. J'aimerais savoir, dans cette recherche de cimetières non marqués, qui sont non marqués aujourd'hui, est-ce qu'on fera la distinction entre les cimetières qui n'ont jamais été marqués, même à l'époque du décès des enfants, et ceux qui l'ont été à l'époque du décès, mais dont les marques ont disparu avec le temps?
Donc, je vais commencer, mais je crois peut-être c'est Monsieur Miller ou Madame Bennett qui auront plutôt la réponse. Merci pour la question, Madame Buzetti. Je crois que c'est une question de genre qui va être abordée par le comité spécial parce que c'est vraiment technique ainsi que juridique. Et donc, évidemment, il y a
Allô?
David, you're muted. T'es sûr que t'es en sourdine?
Oh, excusez-moi, j'ai repoussé le bouton. Donc, je crois que c'est le genre de question qui va être abordé par le comité technique de Madame Bennett, surtout. Mais évidemment, il y a une relation juridique là-dedans et donc un rôle aussi pour un interlocuteur spécial de faciliter le dialogue entre une communauté qui voudrait examiner un cimetière avec l'appui de notre gouvernement. Donc, ce n'est pas une question qui est facile à aborder dès le début. Ça va dépendre effectivement sur les faits et le contexte particulier dans chaque cas. Mais nous sommes ouverts, évidemment, travailler avec les communautés autochtones dans chaque cas de trouver la vérité. Parce que c'est la seule façon vraiment d'avancer la réconciliation, d'avancer la guérison. Donc, j'invite mes collègues à commenter là-dessus aussi.
Je ne sais pas si j'ai davantage à rajouter. Comme David l'a dit très clairement, c'est une question immensément complexe qui relève des procédés, des processus archéologiques sur les sites qui sont et qui seront choisis. Évidemment, les gens veulent faire la distinction entre ce qui était peut-être jadis un cimetière ou un vulgaire site d'enfouissement. Et c'est évidemment dans cette quête de la vérité. Dans le cas, par exemple, de Kawassis, on parlait peut-être d'une combinaison, mais surtout d'un cimetière qui était repassé à un moment donné où il y avait des croix en bois qui n'ont pas survécu, mais où ce qui a été allégué, c'était le prêtre à l'époque avait repassé le site. Alors, et donc à d'autres sites, par exemple à Shubenacadie, où malgré les fouilles archéologiques, et je l'ai visité entre autres, rien n'a été trouvé. Ça ne veut pas dire que des atrocités n'ont pas été commises pour autant. Et c'est l'importance dans tout ça, c'est cette recherche pour la vérité. Ça va être une question qui va être répondue et qui va être très, très complexe à répondre. Mais il reste qu'il va falloir respecter ce qui a toujours été connu par les survivants et les aînés autochtones qui ont pointé à des sites où les gens étaient enterrés. Et de là à décomplexifier cette complexité, ça va être très, très, très difficile. Puis ça va évidemment dépendre du site en question, Hélène.
Mais en fait, en sous-question, Monsieur Méndez, en fait, ma question c'est est-ce que vous pensez qu'il y a une obligation de faire cette distinction? On parle de faire la lumière. En ce moment, il y a beaucoup de gens moins informés qui pensent que tous les sites qui sont découverts sont tous des espèces de charniers où des gens ont été enfouis de manière plus ou moins secrète, alors que dans certains cas, on parle vraiment de cimetières qui sont plutôt tombés dans l'oubli avec le temps. En tant que gouvernement, trouvez-vous qu'il y a une obligation de faire cette distinction si on est pour faire la lumière complète sur ces événements?
L'obligation, c'est de donner des voix à ceux qui l'ont jamais eu et qui n'ont jamais été crus. Et évidemment, de me demander ce que je pense que le gouvernement fédéral doit imposer comme croyance aux gens, on revient au point de départ, selon moi. Donc, écoutez, c'est clair que les gens veulent avoir la vérité. Dans cette vérité, il y a des distinctions, mais il me semble que à travers dans les gens qui disent c'est rien qu'un vieux cimetière qui a été repassé, je pense qu'il y a une certaine ignorance qui souvent ce genre d'affirmation. Puis si les gens veulent rentrer dans la complexité, je les invite à le faire parce que c'est très complexe, c'est très blessant et surtout d'abord et avant tout, l'important c'est de mettre la place et donner la place la voix aux gens qui n'ont pas été crus au point de départ.
C'est très important, Hélène, pour et dans les appels d'action de la Commission de la vérité et la réconciliation, d'avoir un processus géré par les communautés autochtones et leurs priorités. Comme ministre Miller a dit, c'est l'exemple de Kawassis, où c'est dans les années 60, une ancienne cimetière était enterrée et les pierres sont disparues. mais c'est pour la communauté d'identifier des distinctions ou l'histoire complète.
Merci beaucoup. Cela fait fin à la période de questions. This now ends the question period with the media. Elder David Sir Cook was invited today to close this important morning with a closing prayer. Unfortunately, due to technical difficulties, he was not able to join us today. L'aîné David Sir Cook a été invité à la clôture aujourd'hui, mais n'a pas pu se joindre à nous en raison de difficultés techniques. Merci beaucoup et cela fait fin à la conférence de presse. Thank you, and now we will close this press conference.
Thank you for listening today, and thank you for supporting us with our sponsors. Please go to depictions.media for more information, and click on our contact link and let us know how we can help bring your story and help bring us to a better world. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.